While their children worked grueling hours to support the family, these selfish parents were secretly gambling away every penny their kids earned, leaving child stars destitute when they discovered their life's work had been lost to poker games and horse races. Jackie Coogan, the boy who built a fortune only to claim it back. The man who became the living embodiment of this financial betrayal was the most beloved boy on the planet in the 1920s, Jackie Coogan. From the moment he appeared alongside Charlie Chaplin in The Kid in 1921, Coogan became a global sensation. His expressive face and effortless pathos captivated audiences worldwide, leading to an immediate and massive commercial success that few adult actors ever achieved. Coogan earned an astronomical $3 to $4 million over his early career, an unprecedented sum for the era, estimated to be worth well over $60 million today. His income flowed not just from films, but from lucrative endorsements and merchandising deals, including Coogan-branded butter, dolls, hats, and even stationery. His father, John Coogan Sr., and his mother, Lillian, were legally responsible for these enormous earnings, but they failed utterly in their fiduciary duty. They established Coogan Incorporated to manage the money, but treated the corporation's funds as their own personal checking account, believing they had the absolute right to spend as they pleased, as they were the ones who brought him into the world and guided his career. By the time Jackie reached his 21st birthday in 1935, eagerly expecting to take control of this colossal fortune, he was told by his parents he was entitled to nothing. When he inquired about the funds, his stepfather, Arthur Bernstein, reportedly told him that Jackie had earned every penny, but that he had also spent every penny, suggesting the immense and extravagant expenses were all necessary for his career upkeep and the maintenance of his public image. They explained that his earnings had been completely consumed by extravagant spending and poor business choices. Jackie's millions were gone, spent on luxury automobiles, diamond jewelry, elaborate gifts for his parents, expensive real estate across California, and the upkeep of a lavish lifestyle designed to reflect his worldwide fame, leaving him with a fraction of his earnings after a 7-year legal battle. The emotional devastation was profound, compounded by the fact that the courts initially sided with his mother and stepfather, noting that under California law at the time, a child's earnings were legally owned by their parents. This heartbreaking ruling, which left the era's biggest child star almost penniless, sparked public outrage that crossed state lines. This public outcry led directly to the passage of the California Child Actors Bill in 1937, universally known as the Coogan Law. This landmark legislation mandated that 15% of a minor's earnings be placed into a court-supervised trust fund, ensuring a degree of financial protection for young performers to this day. The Coogan Law remains Jackie's lasting, painful legacy, a monument to the betrayal he suffered at the hands of the two people who should have protected him most. Mickey Rooney, the vault emptied by those closest to him. The lack of protection Jackie Coogan suffered meant his heartbreak was immediately mirrored by the boundless energy of the era's biggest box office draw, Mickey Rooney. With a career spanning 9 decades, Rooney holds the record for the longest continuous employment in motion picture history. In his youth, he was a box office phenomenon, starring in the immensely popular Andy Hardy film series and earning a breathtaking $6,000 per week, equal to tens of thousands in modern currency, during his 1930s and 1940s peak. He was once the highest-paid teenager in Hollywood, essentially carrying MGM's profits on his young shoulders, making him indispensable to the studio. Yet, like Coogan, when Rooney finally gained control of his finances, he discovered he was bankrupt. His mother, Nell Ewell, and his stepfather, Fred, had relentlessly spent his enormous earnings supporting a lavish lifestyle of costly homes, expensive racehorses, and unchecked expenditures, viewing his steady salary as a perpetual fountain of income. They never established a stable financial structure for him, believing the income stream would be eternal and making no provisions for slow periods or retirement. Mickey stated that his parents were simply incapable of properly managing the enormous amount of money he generated. The lack of a Coogan-style trust fund meant that when his career hit a lull in the 1950s and his income slowed, Rooney was forced to file for bankruptcy. He reportedly had only $50 remaining from his childhood earnings, a shocking sum considering his career highs. This financial instability shadowed him for decades, contributing to a chaotic private life marked by 8 marriages and a constant, desperate need to keep working, not for glory, but simply to survive and pay off old debts. The energy he projected on screen often masked the gnawing fear that he would never truly be secure. His early financial loss profoundly affected his adult choices and ability to trust. Judy Garland, star power, bankrupting the family and the self. Mickey's heartbreak led him to years of financial instability, a cycle tragically familiar to the woman who became his most famous co-star, Judy Garland. The little girl born Frances Ethel Gum possessed a unique voice that made her immensely valuable, especially to MGM studio chief Louis B. Mayer, who famously called her his little gold mine. Judy's mother, Ethel Gum, a formidable woman in her own right, served as the primary manager of Judy's early career and finances. While the blame often rests with the ruthless studio system, Ethel's focus was exclusively on maximizing Judy's earning potential and maintaining her star status, often at the expense of her daughter's well-being and demanding perfection at every turn. Ethel consistently pushed Judy to work despite illness or fatigue, seeing her child not just as a daughter but as a critical, irreplaceable asset for the family's survival. The resulting financial arrangement meant that Judy never developed a sound financial footing. The financial insecurity compounded the emotional instability caused by the studio's regimen of pills for dieting and sleeping, leaving her forever battling the fear of destitution. For instance, her family frequently drew advances against her future income, meaning that for months at a time, Judy was essentially working for free, desperately trying to keep up with debts they accrued for their costly Hollywood lifestyle. The constant draining of her resources meant that even at the height of her fame, she had little personal savings to shield her from the inevitable lulls. The pressure from her mother was relentless, seeing Judy's paycheck as the immediate answer to every financial need the family had, including moving them to a more expensive, high-profile neighborhood required for her networking. By the time she became one of the greatest legends of the 20th century, the money she earned had long since slipped away, leaving her dependent on the next paycheck until the day she passed away, a pattern that tragically followed her through her life. Freddy Bartholomew, the relentless greed of the controlling aunt. The control was often exerted by relatives who saw the child not as kin, but as a business venture. Take, for instance, the refined British import who captivated audiences in Little Lord Fauntleroy, Freddy Bartholomew. Born in England, Freddy was brought to Hollywood by his controlling aunt, C.L., who acted as his manager. From 1935 to 1938, Freddy was one of Hollywood's top earners, raking in hundreds of thousands of dollars, a massive sum for a teenager at the time. Aunt C.L., however, quickly became accustomed to a life of extraordinary luxury, paying herself an exorbitant salary out of Freddy's earnings and spending freely on lavish items like custom furniture, trips across Europe, and elaborate wardrobes for herself and her husband. She saw his talent as a ticket to high society and managed his finances aggressively for personal gain. When Freddy's biological parents attempted to regain custody, a lengthy, high-profile legal struggle ensued, not over love, but over control of the child's income, which CL fiercely fought to retain. The legal fees and the cost of CL's upkeep consumed most of Freddy's fortune. The custody battle lasted nearly 3 years, during which Freddy could not work due to the legal dispute, completely stalling his career and forcing him onto relief funds after his account was emptied by his aunt's excessive spending. By the time the case was finally resolved in 1938, Freddy was nearly broke. The financial and emotional exhaustion led him to retire from acting in the 1940s, leaving behind a career that had been systematically drained of its financial potential by the very person who had vowed to protect him. Shirley Temple, the mother who wielded the money as control. If Jackie Coogan's story was one of reckless theft, the fate of Shirley Temple was a subtler kind of tragedy. She was the one star whose wealth was protected, yet whose life was controlled by her mother, who used her immense earnings as a weapon to ensure a star's absolute compliance. No star was more disciplined or successful in her youth than Shirley Temple. Her unparalleled 1930s popularity saved a major studio, Fox, from financial ruin and made her family wealthy beyond measure. Shirley's mother, Gertrude Temple, acted as her sole guardian and manager. While Gertrude was notoriously conservative with Shirley's actual capital, notably insisting on a trust fund for future stability that protected her future assets, she was absolute in her control over Shirley's life, schedule, and public image. She even managed her daughter's famous corkscrew curls count, ensuring perfection for the public eye, often enforcing a rigid schedule with little time for play. Gertrude's behavior made it clear that the family's wealth was dependent on Shirley's performance. The financial arrangement created a powerful psychological barrier. Shirley was always aware that her entire family's luxurious existence, the large home, the fine clothes, the expensive tutors, and the trips, was entirely dependent on her ability to perform and remain the perfect, cheerful screen angel without complaint. This financial dependency, though not an outright theft, imposed an immense immense burden of responsibility on a child that few adults could bear, robbing her of a normal, carefree childhood and fostering a sense of duty over self. The emotional toll was the price of the saved fortune. Bobby Driscoll, the downfall of Disney's golden boy. In some of the darkest cases, the financial exploitation robbed the child star of their security, leading to a tragic, penniless end far removed from the spotlight. This was the fate of Bobby Driscoll, the bright, charismatic star of Disney's Song of the South and the voice of Peter Pan. Driscoll had a promising career, earning well for his family throughout the 1940s and early 1950s. He was even awarded a Miniature Academy Award in 1950 for his work in The Window, signifying him as a young talent of immense promise. However, when his physical appearance changed as he reached adolescence, Disney abruptly terminated his contract in 1953, citing his severe acne as a factor in his loss of boyish charm. The gold mine vanished overnight. Since his parents had failed to save or invest wisely for him, the end of the studio contract meant the end of the family's income and security. With no steady income and the savings poorly managed, the family struggled immediately. The family left Hollywood, hoping to find work in other parts of the country, but the income never materialized, leaving Bobby directionless and without the foundation he needed to transition to adult roles. Bobby later drifted into poverty and struggled with dependency on substances. The failure of his childhood fortune to provide a safety net meant that when he was no longer valuable to the studios, he had nothing left. Driscoll's life reached an unfortunate conclusion in great obscurity. Discovered in a New York tenement building, unclaimed and unidentified for weeks, a tragic reminder that childhood success offered no guarantee of a secure adulthood. Gloria Jean, Universal's sweetheart and the empty paycheck. For many young performers, the realization of their plight came only when their contract finally ended, revealing a shocking vacuum where their savings should have been. This was the experience of Gloria Jean, Universal Pictures' bright-eyed singing sweetheart of the 1940s. Signed at 13, Gloria Jean earned significant sums for Universal, but her contract was structured to heavily favor the studio, and the remainder of her earnings were managed by her mother. Her mother often served as her business manager, making crucial decisions about investments, including several unsuccessful ventures, relying on optimism rather than financial caution or professional advice. Like many stage parents, Gloria Jean's mother lacked the financial expertise to protect her daughter's considerable income, failing to grasp the necessity of long-term planning. She made poor investments and failed to set aside enough money for the future. When her film career waned and the promised savings were nowhere to be found, Gloria Jean found herself facing financial difficulty, forced to work in lower-budget films and later returning to the arduous grind of vaudeville and nightclubs just to make ends meet. She later found work as a receptionist, completely detached from her glamorous past, a stark indicator of her financial reality. The star who had once delighted millions found that the fruits of her childhood labor had vanished into the pockets of others, forcing her to work well into her adulthood simply to achieve financial parity. Dean Stockwell, a lost boy and a lost fortune. Even the most talented young actors, seemingly destined for lifetime careers, found their youth's hard work dissolved into thin air by the time they reached adulthood. Dean Stockwell, a remarkably intense and sophisticated child actor, starred in acclaimed films like The Boy with Green Hair and Anchors Aweigh. His father, an actor often absent, left the financial burden entirely on his mother, who had little experience managing large sums of money. Dean's early success, while bringing the family income, was poorly managed, with much of the money going toward maintaining the family's presence in Hollywood, including paying for expensive tutors and private schooling necessary for child actors to meet mandatory educational requirements. The psychological impact of being the primary source of income for his struggling family was immense, leading to a complicated relationship with his profession. When Dean turned 16 and tried to access his earnings to pursue an education and a non-acting career, he discovered the accounts were empty. All the sacrifices, all the years of rigorous studio work had left him with no financial safety net, forcing him to rely on others as an adult and seek alternative work. This profound sense of betrayal caused him to abandon acting for several years, searching for an identity and security he never found in the movie business. The money had evaporated through the hands of the adults he trusted most. If these stories of betrayal resonate with you, and if you find yourself compelled by the real sacrifices made behind the gilded curtain of old Hollywood, please consider subscribing to our channel, Golden Age Files. We specialize in bringing the full, complicated humanity of these legends to light, ensuring their resilience and their warnings are never forgotten. And the warning was clear. For stars like Dicky Moore, the money was often a mirage. a cruel psychological trick played by the adults who were supposed to be the children's most trusted protectors. Dicky Moore, a lifetime of work for a handful of dollars. The money was often a mirage, a psychological trick played by the adults who were supposed to be the children's most trusted protectors. Dicky Moore was one of the few actors who truly spanned the transition from silent film to the talkies. Having worked almost non-stop since the 1920s, he possessed one of the longest careers of any child star. Yet, in his later book, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, Moore detailed the brutal financial structure of child labor in Hollywood. He explained how the studio system, aided by parental compliance, systematically exploited young performers, paying them minimal wages relative to the film's enormous profits, a system that benefited everyone but the child. His parents, though perhaps not malicious, prioritized the ongoing income stream over their son's future security, allowing the system to consume his earnings through commissions, living expenses, and poor structuring. Moore's parents, focused on their son's employment, often accepted terms that heavily favored the studios, resulting in low residuals and little long-term gain for Dicky, a common failing of parent managers focused only on the short-term survival. Moore's own story became a powerful indictment of the industry that chewed up children and left them with little to show for their efforts. Bonita Granville, the cost of keeping up appearances. The pressure to maintain the glamorous image of Hollywood wealth often led parents to treat their child's salary as an allowance for the entire family's extravagant lifestyle. Bonita Granville, a talented actress known for her appearances in films like These Three and the Nancy Drew series, earned a substantial income in the late 1930s and 1940s. Her parents, who managed her career, used her money to support a comfortable, upper-class lifestyle that matched her star image. This included a large house, multiple residences, and a full staff. While the family enjoyed every luxury, Bonita herself had little control over the earnings she generated. Her parents established a production company that managed her career, further obscuring the true state of her personal finances and ensuring their continued control over the disbursements, making it difficult for her to track where her money went. She was forced to carry the enormous financial weight of her entire household on her young shoulders, creating a deep-seated resentment. She often spoke about the pressure to be constantly cheerful and compliant, knowing that her family's entire existence depended on her continued employment and professional success. Mitzi Green, the vaudeville star who never saw her savings. Before the film studios took over, the vaudeville circuit proved to be an even more brutal and immediate environment for child stars and their financially dependent parents. Mitzi Green, a delightful child star of vaudeville and early talkies who appeared in Paramount on Parade and Tom Sawyer, faced this grueling reality. Her parents, like many vaudeville families, controlled her income absolutely, viewing her as the sole breadwinner for the entire act. Since there was no Coogan law yet and no concept of a trust fund, her considerable earnings were spent immediately to support her traveling lifestyle and the family's upkeep, often moving from city to city and paying for expensive travel and lodging, which quickly depleted her substantial paychecks. By the time Mitzi reached adulthood, the income stream had largely vanished, leaving her to face financial difficulty without any savings from her youth. The actress who brought so much joy to audiences ended up walking away from Hollywood in the 1940s, financially exhausted and disheartened by the lack of security after years of intense labor, only later returning as an adult performer, having learned the harsh lesson of financial negligence caused by her parents' lack of foresight. Jane Withers, the star whose parents did everything but save. Some stars found that their parents, while not malicious or outright thieves, were simply incompetent stewards of a potentially massive fortune. Jane Withers, the spunky, fast-talking star who provided a much-needed contrast to Shirley Temple's sweetness, worked constantly throughout the 1930s and 1940s. Her parents, though devoted to her career, were inexperienced with managing the complex finances of a major star. They often confused their personal accounts with her professional earnings, viewing the entire sum as a family fund, justifying their spending as necessary for her comfort and promotion. The contrast between Jane's rigorous work ethic — she often shot multiple films per year — and the parents' financial reliance for their own daily life was stark. Jane later discovered that the careful savings she believed were accumulating for her future were actually minimal, having been eroded by mismanagement and unchecked expenses. This forced her to work longer and harder than she should have needed, a consequence of parental good intentions gone awry. Margaret O'Brien, the mother who guarded the golden goose. A child's value was often seen not in her talent, but in the income stream she provided. And some mothers guarded that golden stream with terrifying, meticulous intensity. Margaret O'Brien, the Academy Award-winning star of Meet Me in Street, Louie, was carefully managed by her mother. Margaret's mother was infamous in Hollywood for her rigid control over her daughter's schedule, image, and social interactions, effectively isolating her from the normal world, often keeping her in perpetual child mode to maintain her marketable image. The money she earned was tightly controlled and managed, but its existence served as an absolute barrier, preventing Margaret from having any autonomy or choice. Her mother viewed the income as an entity to be protected at all costs, frequently rejecting opportunities she felt might diminish Margaret's earnings or star status, keeping her in high-paying but restrictive roles. She was the asset that could not be allowed to break or stray. This extreme control, enforced by the financial dependency, meant that Margaret grew up perpetually aware of her status as the family's financial engine, eroding her ability to trust and form normal relationships, and leaving her to grapple with isolation as a young adult. Roddy McDowall, The Sacrifice for a New Life. For European children escaping war or poverty, the Hollywood paycheck was not just wealth, but a lifeline, one the parents felt justified in consuming entirely. Roddy McDowall, a refined young actor, and his mother fled England for the safety and opportunity of Hollywood at the onset of World War II. Roddy's immediate success in films like How Green Was My Valley made him the sole financial provider for his family in their new country. His mother, who acted as his manager, felt the immense pressure of their situation, and their family's complete dependence on his earnings created profound, lifelong financial anxiety for Roddy. His childhood earnings were used to establish and maintain their new American life, funding their move, securing their residency, and providing education for Roddy and his sister, creating an atmosphere where his work was paramount to survival. The money bought them safety and a new beginning, but it came at the expense of Roddy's childhood and his personal security, leaving him burdened by a debt of gratitude he could never truly repay. Anne Blyth, The Contract That Bound Her and Her Mother. The ironclad contracts signed by the parents often favored the studio, but the money was still the family's sole, precarious resource. Anne Blyth, an elegant actress and singer known for her roles in musicals and dramatic films, had her early career managed by her mother. During her 1940s peak, her earnings became the foundation for the entire family's existence. The contract structure, which minimized her long-term financial gain, combined with her family's immediate financial need, left Anne with little control over her income. This situation created a deep fear of financial failure that followed her into adulthood, resulting in her becoming exceptionally conservative with her money and highly protective of her personal security once she finally gained control of her finances. She understood that without the Coogan law's protection for her early career, her mother's desperate need for income had left her vulnerable to the studio's demands and long, restrictive contract terms. She learned early that Hollywood money could disappear as quickly as it arrived. Donald O'Connor, The Family Troupe and the Vanishing Paydays. In the world of vaudeville and early film, the parents were often the co-stars, blurring the line between family and financial partners and ensuring the child was paid only as a member of the act. Donald O'Connor, the famed dancer and comedian, grew up literally on the stage as part of the O'Connor family troupe. From the age of 3, his income, derived from grueling stage work and early film appearances, was immediately absorbed into the family business. There was never an individual savings account or a discussion of his future security. There was only the next performance required to keep the family operation running, day after demanding day, with constant travel and physical strain. The demands of the family troupe ensured his extraordinary talent developed quickly, but it left him with no personal capital from his youth. The star who danced his way across the screen was constantly working off a debt to a family structure that relied entirely on his tiny dancing feet. A golden age legacy built on broken promises. As we continue to chronicle these 25 tragic revelations, the pattern becomes clear. Childhood success in Hollywood often brought comfort for the parents, while leaving the stars themselves exposed and vulnerable. If any of these tragic stories of financial betrayal have surprised you the most, please let us know in the comments below, and tell us, what Golden Age Hollywood topic would you like Golden Age Files to uncover next? Your suggestions help guide our research into the true cost of classic stardom. Billy and Bobby Mauch, the twins who disappeared from the screen. When two incomes were merged, the potential for financial depletion was doubled, and the twins' chance for an ordinary life was halved. This was the fate of Billy and Bobby Mauch, the handsome, identical twin stars of the 1937 film The Prince and the Pauper. The twins' joint incomes were managed by their parents, who, like many, saw the combined salaries as license for a lavish family lifestyle. The family quickly adjusted to the increased income, resulting in larger expenditures on homes and cars that far outpaced the actual savings, relying on the continuous flow of income from both boys. The lack of proper financial planning meant that their considerable earnings were rapidly consumed, leaving the boys nothing to fall back on when their acting careers ended abruptly. Both twins left Hollywood almost immediately upon reaching adulthood, exhausted and feeling that their years of effort had yielded no personal financial reward. They sought anonymity and ordinary careers outside of the film industry, a powerful statement about the emotional and financial bankruptcy they felt after their intensive childhood in the spotlight. Patty Duke, the exploitation of trust by proxies. Some children didn't just have greedy parents, they had parents who handed their money and their very lives over to even more exploitative figures. This was the crushing reality for Academy Award winner Patty Duke. During her early career, her dysfunctional family environment led her to be placed under the management of a couple, John and Ethel Ross. The Rosses immediately assumed complete control over her personal life, schedule, and, most critically, her finances. They isolated her from her biological family and systematically drained her earnings through exorbitant fees and costs. The Rosses even changed her name, demanding she live a life completely manufactured for the public, severing her connection to her past and creating a manufactured persona that was easier to market. Patty Duke later successfully filed a lawsuit against the Rosses, detailing the financial and psychological abuse she had suffered for years at their hands. Her eventual financial security came only after a painful and lengthy battle to reclaim the money that had been stolen by the very people entrusted with her care. Elizabeth Taylor, the mother who controlled the image and the wallet. For the most beautiful and valuable stars, the mother's role became that of a high-stakes gatekeeper, using the control of money to ensure absolute obedience and compliance. Elizabeth Taylor, who possessed one of the longest and most lucrative careers in Hollywood, was meticulously managed by her mother, Sarah Taylor. Sarah's control was legendary. She meticulously orchestrated Elizabeth's contracts, career moves, and public image from the time she was a small girl, never allowing her to step outside the carefully crafted boundaries of a studio star. Sarah was not a spendthrift. The money was largely preserved, but its existence served as a tool of psychological control. Elizabeth was constantly aware that her mother held the keys to her personal fortune, reinforcing a dynamic of dependence that marked her early life. While the money was held, not gambled, its existence served as a sophisticated weapon. She had access to millions, yet had less freedom than her own housekeeper, unable to spend a penny or make a career choice without her mother's express, often ruthless, permission. The control was absolute, restricting her freedom and autonomy despite her enormous wealth, essentially trading her childhood freedom for future wealth and security, an arrangement that deeply affected her adult relationships. The control, not the loss, was the source of the betrayal. Gigi Perreau, a childhood spent earning a family living. When the child star was the sole, indispensable earner for a large family, the pressure and the fear of losing that income often became unbearable for everyone involved. Gigi Perreau, a prolific child actress of the 1940s and 1950s, faced this immense burden. She was the primary source of income for her large family, often working non-stop to ensure they had a secure living. Her parents relied heavily on her early earnings, and the responsibility was tremendous for a child, who began her career at an incredibly young age, appearing in numerous films across different studios. This financial pressure forced the entire family into a precarious situation where Gigi's constant employment was a requirement, not a choice. Her salary covered not only basic needs, but also provided a substantial living for her many siblings, meaning if she stopped working, the entire household suffered immediate financial difficulty and uncertainty. The experience left a lasting mark, revealing the quiet sacrifices made by children who were forced to grow up long before their time. Daryl Hickman, the financial sacrifice of sibling success. Success often became a trap, forcing older siblings to sacrifice their education or their own careers for the younger star's career earnings. Daryl Hickman, a talented child actor whose career began in the 1930s, and his brother Dwayne, later famous as Dobie Gillis. Both worked consistently in the industry. The Hickman family's focus and financial stability centered intensely on managing the children's careers, often prioritizing immediate income over their children's long-term educational or personal development needs, operating their home as a perpetual acting workshop. Daryl was the eldest, and his early success, beginning with Broadway roles before Hollywood, established the family's financial base in California. Daryl's early income was critical to supporting his family as they pursued opportunities for his younger brother Dwayne, effectively financing the start of his siblings' lucrative career. Their parents invested heavily in the acting careers of both boys, draining any immediate savings to secure coaches, professional headshots, and specialized marketing materials, operating entirely on the belief that future success would justify the present expense and that the income stream should be treated as a unitary family asset. This created an atmosphere of intense professional pressure within the home, where personal pursuits often took a back seat to the next audition. The financial pressures and the need to keep the income flowing meant that Daryl, despite his early success, often felt that his personal ambitions were secondary to the family's overall financial requirements. He expressed a sense that his earnings, though substantial for a child, were never truly his own, but belonged instead to the family unit dedicated to maintaining their Hollywood foothold. This common scenario in Hollywood saw parents making decisions based on perceived monetary gain rather than the holistic well-being of their children. Peggy Ryan, dancing for survival, not stardom. The glitter of Hollywood and the splash of the musical screen often hid the desperate reality of performers who were working simply to keep the family financially afloat. Peggy Ryan, a vivacious dancer and actress famed for her fast-paced routines in film musicals of the 1940s, started her career incredibly young on the vaudeville circuit, a demanding environment that required constant travel and grueling practice sessions. Her mother, who managed her career, entirely relied on Peggy's paycheck for the family's basic survival, relocating them frequently based on where the work was available, often sacrificing stability for income. Her dancing was not a route to luxury or fame, but a stark means to pay the rent and put food on the table for her family, establishing her as the primary economic engine from a very early age. The urgency of their situation meant that every penny earned was immediately consumed by the cost of living, travel expenses, housing, and food, with no possibility of setting aside reserves or building a financial safety net for Peggy's future. The family operated on a week-to-week basis, always chasing the next booking. Peggy's financial situation throughout her youth was one of necessity, not ambition, highlighting how many child stars were essentially financial laborers carrying their families on their backs, without the benefit of a Coogan Law Trust Fund in her earliest touring days. Her earnings were necessary to keep them from destitution, making her employment utterly non-negotiable for her parents, who pushed her relentlessly to perform, despite the extreme physical toll of her strenuous dancing roles, which demanded peak athletic performance daily. The constant pressure of knowing that her next performance directly ensured the family's survival created an emotional burden few children could comprehend, forcing her to be an adult wage earner before she had the chance to be a child. Deanna Durbin, retirement, born of financial exhaustion. The inevitable result of this constant financial and emotional pressure was often an early and often permanent retreat from the constant glare of the spotlight. Deanna Durbin, the 1930s and 1940s box office phenomenon who famously saved Universal Studios from bankruptcy, chose this path. Her beautiful voice and wholesome image made her a star of immense financial value, with her films generating millions in profit for the studio, while her money was generally well managed by the bank-appointed trustee. The mental and emotional exhaustion from being the family's financial foundation and the savior of an entire studio was overwhelming. Durbin felt the profound burden of carrying the entire financial future of her parents and siblings. The non-stop demands of the studio system, which often required her to film 3 pictures a year, and the pressure to maintain the perfect, cheerful, girl-next-door image, finally took its toll, leaving her deeply cynical about the industry that relied so heavily on her presence and charisma. She felt like a valuable corporate asset rather than a person. Durbin shocked the world by retiring completely at the age of 28, having just completed her final film, exchanging her million-dollar career for a quiet life in France. She simply walked away from the money, turning down contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, choosing peace and anonymity over the lifelong financial obligation that stardom imposed, needing to escape the relentless pressure she had carried since childhood. In France, She found the solitude and a sense of normalcy that the artificial glamour of Hollywood had never allowed her to possess. Jane Powell, The Price of a Perfect Image. For the wholesome musical star, the financial pressure was simply another secret to keep rigidly hidden behind a perfect, smiling facade. Jane Powell, the delightful Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer musical star, was another victim of parental control, masked as protection. Her mother's rigid management and the tightly structured financial terms of her studio contracts, typical of the time, meant that Jane had virtually no autonomy or access to her own money during her youth and early 20s. Despite earning vast sums for the studio through her popular films, she was given only a small, tightly controlled allowance, barely enough for minor personal expenses, while her earnings were managed entirely by her parents. The actress, who projected such effortless cheer and dancing spontaneity on screen, was privately resentful of the lack of control over her own financial destiny. She felt that the studio and her family treated her as a commodity that generated income, but was not entitled to manage that income. She later wrote candidly in her autobiography about the profound disappointment and deep sense of betrayal of discovering how little control she truly had over her own accumulated income until she became much older, realizing she had been legally blocked from it. The money was technically saved and held for her, but the feeling of being perpetually managed and controlled was the lasting financial betrayal, stealing her sense of independence and causing friction that strained her relationship with her parents for decades. If you have been moved by the hidden costs of Golden Age stardom and want these complex human histories to be fully realized, we kindly ask that you like this video and share this crucial piece of cinematic history. Your support helps us continue to produce these detailed historical accounts. Lana Turner, The Family's Vow of Silence. The greatest stars often carried the deepest secrets, not just of their own lives, but of the families they felt perpetually obligated to support a debt they could never fully repay. Lana Turner, the definition of glamour and sophistication, had a powerful rags-to-riches story, discovered famously in a drugstore soda fountain. Her mother, who was instrumental in Lana's discovery, relied heavily on her daughter's escalating income throughout her career, managing her initial affairs and drawing a salary from the star's production company. While Lana's fame brought her extraordinary wealth, her family's sustained financial reliance on her created a powerful and unspoken obligation that weighed on her career decisions. The family struggled constantly with money before her discovery, enduring years of hardship, and that deep-seated fear of returning to poverty fueled their reliance on her paycheck and her continued success. Lana later found that she had become trapped by her early success, perpetually supporting a family structure that had grown dependent on her earnings and had no alternative means of support. The glamour she projected was often a mask for the profound loneliness and financial anxiety that accompanied being the sole financial pillar of a dependent family, forcing her to accept roles she might otherwise have refused just to maintain the constant flow of income. This obligation was a secret vow of silence she carried her entire life. These 25 stories, stretching from the 1920s to the 1960s, reveal a dark truth beneath the glittering surface of Hollywood's golden age. The money earned through such rigorous childhood effort was often seen by parents and guardians not as a child's future security, but as a family resource to be consumed, managed, or recklessly gambled away. The cost was paid not just in lost fortunes, but in lost childhoods, deep-seated emotional wounds, and lifelong financial instability that haunted these icons into their later years. These stars, who brought so much joy and escapism to the world, often suffered the profound betrayal of discovering that their hardest work had been frittered away, leaving them with nothing but the fame that had necessitated the sacrifice in the first place. The resilience of these icons, however, shines through. They continued to perform, not just through their personal traumas, but through the devastating financial ruin caused by those closest to them, transforming their private agony into art. When you watch their films today, remember the double lives they were leading, the flawless performance on screen, and the desperate, heartbreaking financial drama being played out behind the scenes. They were, in the truest sense, the children who built Hollywood's fortunes, only to be left to rebuild their own lives from the financial debris left behind by their parents. And there you have it, 25 tragic stories that remind us of the greatest performances in Hollywood's golden age often took place off-screen. We hope uncovering these complex human truths has deepened your appreciation for the talent and resilience of these legends. If you found yourself moved by the sacrifices made behind the gilded curtain, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to Golden Age Files. Don't forget to leave a comment letting us know which star's story surprised you the most, or what classic Hollywood mystery you'd like us to explore next. Until we meet again to celebrate the full, complicated history of the stars who built the Dream Factory, thank you for watching.